So, I'm Neil Martin, and in 1995, I brought mathematical modelling and predictive analytics into the world of Formula One, specifically in the area of race strategy. Little did I know it, but this was the beginning of the digital transformation within Formula One, even though the label did not get coined for at least another 2 decades. For 25 years, I used my algorithm sitting on the pit wall to make live decisions during the race which would fundamentally alter the outcome for our cars. Such was the success of this, we then moved the techniques to apply it to the rest of the business, so soon the entire business were becoming data-driven entities. "30 years ago, we were in the infancy of our data-driven decision-making process. And the people making the decisions back then were typically team owners, senior managers who had been around for years, and they had a lot of experience, a lot of gut feel, but not a lot of data. So when I came along and started applying data, what we found was a number of times the solutions we found, the decisions we made would be the same, but over time, the data-driven approach started to outperform the gut feel and the learned experience. So we literally superseded their performance, and at some unspecified time, the pendulum swung in favor of data so that people started believing the data over the senior manager's beliefs. In fact, we put the senior manager's beliefs into the simulations to actually model the outcome. How powerful are the simulations today? Well, today in a race, typically by lap 10, we can tell you the top 8 finishers and their finishing order, which gives you an idea of the level we're operating at in Formula One. So my approach had fundamentally 3 improvements over previous methods. The first one was, for the first time in history, we embraced risk and we embraced the unknowns to actually model them and say what the likely outcome would be under this criteria. So things such as traffic patterns, safety cars, or other unfortunate events, we actually modeled them so that we can actually work out what the best response was under that criteria. Secondly, when people make decisions, if a bad outcome occurs, such that they lose a lot of positions or look foolish with the wrong tyres on the car when it's wet weather, they will be disproportionately scarred by that, and they will internally bias it as a negative event. And what we do is we're able to put numbers on those events to say, is it a 1 in 10 chance? Is it a 1 in 1,000 chance? Or is it 1 in a lifetime event? So we remove that personal bias. The third advantage was we were operating in real time. So as more data came in, we were running millions of simulations with each new data point to look at millions of different future outcomes of the race, such that if one of those options did occur, we already had calculated the answer in advance. So that gave us a considerable advantage rather than waiting for something to happen to then calculate it. Risk is where the opportunity lies. Understanding these events and making better decisions in these scenarios leads directly to competitive advantage. Random events, by definition, will happen outside of your control and when you least expect them. So by planning for these, by leaning into them and modelling them, it allows us to plan our best response or even be opportunistic under this criteria and pivot on this information to achieve an even better outcome. However, there's 2 ways you can look at it. You can either look at it as bad luck and not plan, and if you make a decision on the fly, you're most likely to make a far worse decision than had you modelled it in advance and planned your response should that occur. The second thing to say about risk is that every decision you make in every business has risk attached to it. It's understanding your appetite for risk so that you choose how much risk you're going to take for each decision, so you do so knowingly. Data analysis allows us to put the gut feel or learned behaviours of people into perspective. What it allows us to do is take the emotion out of the beliefs and the decisions and let the data tell the story for itself. So on a micro level in Formula One, this might be sensors on the car. We have data analytics scanning those sensors all of the time looking for anomalies. But they're not just looking for anomalies now, they're actually looking ahead 2, 3, 4 and 5 laps ahead to see if wayward sensors are likely to cause a terminal failure. In doing so, we can say ahead of time to the driver, change to this switch setting, and we can prevent a negative outcome occurring even before it develops into a critical phase. On a slightly larger scale, data analytics might even be used in the company to choose which projects we should follow in the most efficient way to give the best return on investment. So it doesn't matter if we're at the minimal end or the larger scale, we can actually use data analytics for better outcomes everywhere. That's actually a really interesting question. The short answer is you can gain a lot. However, it does come with quite a heavy disclaimer and a few cautions because it's not as easy as that. Formula One makes it look fairly easy, and in that we predict and we control everything and we optimize things, but that's only because we started our data journey some 30 years ago. So with all of that knowledge, we should be quite good after that time. Now, the thing is, in the press, there's a lot of noise around big data, AI, predictive analytics. And the reality is the software applications are only 50% of the story. To prime those software applications to make them useful, it's actually interrogating your own subject matter experts, your own key personnel who've been there some time, to actually prime that software perfectly. Now, talking of key personnel, that comes under corporate knowledge. Today's marketplace has a much more transient personnel theme going through it. So it's really important that we have knowledge management systems in place such that we're not constantly relearning the same things over and over again. Finally, I'd like to say that a lot of business problems we have are there because they are complex. And the most important thing that we learn in Formula One is you don't try and solve the problem on day one. You try and get one step closer to solving the problem, so that as long as the solution you put in place is better than the one you had yesterday, you're heading in the right direction. So keep on pushing that continuous improvement. I think going forward, Formula One and international motorsports will always be the proving ground for my new algorithms, predictive analytics and solutions generally. It is such a brutal proving ground that if it works there, it's most likely to work anywhere in any business sector. Beyond that, mainstream businesses have a sea of data and they are wishing to exploit it for their own competitive advantage. So I've been doing recently a lot of work in that area, transferring technologies and techniques into mainstream business to help them have a competitive advantage, which is very gratifying that the algorithms just transfer seamlessly across. I think the reality is, though, in today's society, we are all in analytics races, and my business just happens to be Formula One, where the product is in fact racing cars. Finally, it has to be said, Formula One has been incredibly kind to me over the years, and I've really enjoyed being able to do my love of maths and pass it across as a career. And as such, I couldn't have done that without my education or the universities behind it. And so now I take and mentor a lot of students and bring them into the international motorsport arena, having successfully placed a number of students now in Formula One.